Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to this first meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee this municipal year. We're in a new place. The entry arrangements didn't work very well today, but that will be resolved for next time. I've had a little lesson on the speakers. It should say in front of you there's no light. Well, there is a light actually, but you look down to the keyboard, it says speak, or you'll have ready at the moment, and it's the green button. And apparently the red button is priority, so I'm advised that if I need a bit of emphasis, I can press that.
I think everyone else just has one button.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm the only one who's got a red button. Okay, that's good. You didn't tell me what it did. Okay. So this is a public meeting, and it is being recorded. Could I ask, please, for... first of all, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Graham Wilson, substituted by Councillor Alison Whelan, and Councillor Mike Todd, by Martin Smart, not here. No, so we're one short in that regard. We also have apologies from Rob Bridge, the Chief Executive. Today is his wife's birthday, and he had that difficult decision to make. And also, he will be on holiday at our next meeting. So as a result of not seeing each other, we're going to get together in between meetings just to keep up to speed between the Chief Executive and the committee. Are there any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? No. No, thank you. Okay, announcements from the chair. I think it's a welcome to the newcomers to the committee, and 4 out of the 7 council members are new, and that's a characteristic that we have of trying to maintain professionalism and continuity when, for reasons, there's a natural turnover within the committee. I'd like to welcome David Harwood, who is the second independent person. This brings us in line with the CPCA recommendations about the constituents our Audit and Governance Committee should comprise, and David's appointment was approved by the CPCA at the annual general meeting. On my right, I would welcome the new, I've got it now, Director of Resources, or is it Executive Director of Resources? Executive Director of Resources, Janice, who is in week 3.
Yes, I am. Yes. Okay,
right. So Janice steps into the shoes of Nick Bell. My other point I wanted to make in the announcements that I and David attended an induction for the CPCA yesterday in the Cambridge. Sorry, in Peterborough at the University building. Big show by the officers, but a very limited show by ourselves. And partly, I'm sure, that had something to do with the election week. But we do have a difficulty with the business that committees like ours are outside the business and trying to get a better understanding of what the CPCA is and what it's doing. Is not easy. This is the second time they've had an induction, and I've been doing this for 7 years, and it again reminded me in a new way just how much is going on and how much I didn't know. There'll be an autumn event, and I would encourage people to try and find time in their diaries to attend, because you learn a lot, and we are all part of the combined authority when we're in committees like this, irrespective of where we're from. It was a very good day, and a lot of effort went into it. And then similarly with our development sessions, the officers put in a lot of effort, and I hope you'll be able to squeeze them in your diaries, particularly for the new members. Okay, that concludes the announcement bit. Now we need to do our duty on electing a vice chair. I put a note round to members saying that Councillor Graham Wilson, who's been vice chair for the last 2 years, has indicated, didn't have to twist his arm too much, that he would be willing to serve a further year. And I did ask if anybody had any other proposals. If they let me know, nobody let me know of anything. So what I'm hoping that I will have around the table a proposer for Councillor Wilson as Vice Chair and a seconder. So we've got a proposal from Gary. Could I have a seconder? David, thank you very much. So Councillor Wilson, who couldn't be here today, is duly appointed Vice Chair for a third year. Thank you. Right, item 5 on the agenda are the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to take them as a accurate and fair record? Any comments on the detail? No, thank you. So now if we can go to the action list. I think there's a few items there. I'm just trying to find the page. Can anybody help me with the page?
30.
What?
30.
Well done. I haven't found it. What page am I looking for? 13. Oh, I was way ahead of myself. Let me try again. Because there are a number of open items, I just thought we should make sure we're content. Right, let's take it from the bottom on page 14, so I'll work my way back. Could I just ask about the review of sanctions 10.4 being to take to the July board? Is that still on track, or do we need to do anything?
No, that's still on track. Yes, that's still on track. I couldn't take it to the June board because of pre-elections, so it's on track for the July board.
Thank you. Going to the next page. Business continuity. Are we dealing with the business continuity assurance today?
There's some commentary from our IT services supplier included in the risk report later on in the agenda. And I'll also be circulating a report to the committee offline to give them an update on the actions on that.
Thank you very much. And on the risk register, also at 6.4, it's open, is the culture work stream, which I think is coming to the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I will, let's move on then, if we can, whilst we find her. We can get to the corporate risk register. Are we ready to do that?
Yep, hopefully you can all hear me okay. So good morning, everyone. So this is item 7. This is to note the May 24 corporate risk report, including the risk register, dashboard and heat map in Appendix 1 to 3. It's also to note the proposed risk deep dives and software implementation progress. So overall, there's 1 very high corporate risk, 12 medium risks and 2 low risks. The 1 very high risk is future funding, and that is the risk that also exceeds the Combined Authority risk appetite. More information on that risk is in our risk register in Appendix 1, and as I will mention in a moment, we are proposing this for a risk deep dive at the July meeting. Following regular reviews with risk owners and CMT, there's been 1 substantial change since the March report, which is cybersecurity, that has moved from a high to a medium risk. the impact of the risk has reduced from major to moderate, as the cybersecurity risk has been reviewed and enhanced controls have been put in place. More information on that can be found in 2.1, and the full list of cybersecurity controls are in Appendix 1. 2.2 sets out our proposal for risk deep dives for upcoming meetings across 24 to 25. As the next committee is less than a month away, we propose to focus the July paper on deep dives, in particular a focus on the improvement programme related risks. So this includes future funding, which, as I mentioned, is the risk that's above risk appetite. So we'll be doing a risk deep dive into that at July, along with culture, future viability of the CA, and governance value for money. In September, we propose to do a deep dive into cybersecurity. In November, to focus on the financial ones, which are financial underspend and inflation. And in January, Transforming Cities Fund. 2.3 sets out progress of risk software implementation. So for those of you who do not know, this is a new web-based risk software that's allowed a central and auditable platform to register risks across our work programme. So for a couple of months now, the corporate risk register has been on this platform, and the appendices that you see today are taken from that platform. What we've now done is we've added service level risk registers onto the platform. Everybody's got login details. It's all up and running. We've had one-to-one training by RSM with all service areas throughout April and May. And in June, we had wider training session with all risk owners. Thank you. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Nathan. Before I open the floor, I don't know whether RSM wish to make any comments, because in their opinion, risk is still not yet getting a reasonable assurance.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this is potentially somewhat of a timing issue insofar as our last full audit on this area was September, October of last year. And I think what we concluded at that point was that actually the design of the control framework, which had required improvement in prior years, that had been fully addressed and implemented. So a new risk management framework put in place that we felt was designed effectively. What we have said, and it comes through in our papers as well, is that the content on that risk register required further improvement, regular review. So that was the position when we actually delivered our audit. We've got another audit in this year's programme of work, which I think is sort of September time this year. So we'll come back to the committee with a sort of a fuller, completer view then. But I have been liaising with Chris in terms of, you know, making sure that action is understood and addressed.
Right, so are there comments, questions? Our role here is to note, but that shouldn't hold us back.
Yeah, just I know I sort of mentioned it a few times, coming back to the cyber security, and I noticed and appreciate the risk going down to, or the risk being mitigated in there. I just wondered though if you know, the risk of a cyber attack is quite high these days. There's been a lot of sort of high profile attacks that have happened, and I notice also we talk about our business continuity being around cloud availability. There are attacks on cloud providers that has happened as well. So I think, and also the combined authority would probably be quite a high profile target. I just wondered if that's something that needed to be reviewed or looked at, and how we can actually get the importance of cybersecurity and make it stand out on that risk register. Until you actually lose your IT, you do not realise how reliant you are on it as an organisation. And the work I do, I've seen a few organisations recently that have closed down for vast amounts of time because of cyber attacks in there. The other question I've got is, do we have any sort of data available that sort of shows how effective our precautions are as well, so that we can be assured that that is happening as well?
The second one's probably easier to say, that I don't know off the top of my head, but I can go and talk to our IT service provider and see what is providable in terms of how we can indicate the efficacy of the controls. I would put some caveat around that, as I think it might be difficult to prove a negative, but I'm sure we will be able to do something to at least elucidate what those controls are. In terms of the risk of cyber attack, you're absolutely right. There are increasing numbers of cyber attacks on organisations around the world, particularly governmental ones. What the risk score there really reflects is the controls we have in place in relative to the sector terms, in that we have good controls and mitigations in place for a local authority. The underlying risk is inarguably quite high compared to, say, someone being able to walk into the office, given all the physical security we have. So it is one we keep under constant control, but that's sort of the background behind that scoring.
On the thing that you didn't know, can you make sure in the next report you answer that question? Thank you. Martin, I think you had a question, and welcome. It says speak, you're on.
Oh, it's not. Oh, I can't see like that. I forgot the lights down. Can't see them, can you? Apologies, Chair, for being late for the meeting. Thank you for the presentation, Nathan. So in Appendix 2, you referred to the online corporate risk register. So I just wondered if there's been a comparison with that as compared with the previous methodology, and whether there was any, basically an overlap, Chair. So if there's any difference between those two. Because I'm new, but I presume that that's a new methodology, the online register.
Yeah, that's right. So quite a few things have changed. So the way we previously did it is we used an Excel spreadsheet. As a lot of you will know if you've used Excel, it's very messy. You've got to keep scrolling to the side, scrolling down. You can't really see it in one place. It's not that user-friendly. So the way it's changed now is you can, everybody who's a risk owner and risk lead, they automatically get notified that they've got a risk in the software. They get told to review that risk. They can click on the link. The risk is right there. They can edit the risk in the software. It's really user-friendly. What we then do to pull the report is we just go on reporting section, and the data, the live data on that day where we pull that report together, it will automatically do that for us. So there's no lag in data as well. And then we can export it into whatever format we want, whether it's web-based or Excel or PDF. So it's quite a substantial change, but what we're finding is that it's definitely improved our processes over this last few months.
Just to come back, Nathan. So I don't think I explained myself properly, but thanks, that's useful. But the question I really wanted to know the answer to it is are the outputs from the previous system the same or similar as the outputs from the new system? Because if they're different, we'd need to investigate whether the new system was doing it better or worse, or, yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't get rid of any data when we moved over to the new software. So everything that was in that Excel spreadsheet got taken across to the new software. And I think it's been about 4 or 5 months since the software has been live, and there have been small changes that have been made, and we've been keeping you up to date on all of the changes each meeting, and we'll continue to do that. What the new software is really good at is that it tells you whenever a change has happened. So there's a change log, so we can see everything that's changed since we inputted the data in. We can absolutely send you more information. For example, we let you know what the key change this month was on cybersecurity. If you require any more information on anything that's changed since we moved to the software, we can absolutely send that across.
Following on from that point, what is the, you say you can see what changes have been made and so forth, but what about where changes haven't been made? To what extent is it recorded that someone has actually reviewed the situation and that you know that therefore has been reassessed, although it may not have changed,
Yeah, good question. So obviously, like I said, we send out reminder emails, but the key thing in the software is that there's a last review date. So the PMO, the program office, who I work within, can go into each risk and look at the last review date. We can see if that date hasn't been changed, and if it hasn't been changed, we can go to the risk owner or risk lead. And we regularly do this, particularly for the corporate risks. There's 15 corporate risks, so we go in there, we look at the last review date, and if it's not changed, then we contact and meet with the risk owner and the risk lead.
Sorry, to come back on that, how is that actually evidence that that's actually been done? So we're saying that it relies upon you to go in and check, but to what extent are you then documenting that you've done that and that you've followed this process? Is that then recorded so that we know that that's actually been done?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. That's something that absolutely we can learn from. We can start documenting that going forward. So every time we've met with somebody, we can put it into a spreadsheet. Every time we've reviewed whether something's been updated, we can absolutely document that. Thank you.
Okay, it would obviously be useful if the software was actually capturing all of that. Going back to the cybersecurity situation, what I was trying to look through here is the level of training, because obviously cybersecurity, it says yearly training to educate end users, but cybersecurity is changing on a regular basis. I am doing cybersecurity training probably once a month, maybe even twice a month when something comes out. It is just automatically, there, because these threats are changing and people are changing, and there's always, people forgetting, and all of a sudden they become a little bit complacent. So to what extent is this actually more than just, once a year we've done it, it's a tick box exercise as opposed to a real exercise to really make sure that people have it embedded in their way of behaving, that absolutely any file that they touch, we talk about Excel files, fantastic thing for spreading viruses, Word documents, even better. What have we got in place to ensure that people know exactly what to deal with?
So in addition to the annual formal training that everyone has to get signed off every year that they've completed, whenever there's an identified threat that's reported through someone saying, I've got an email that looks a bit dodgy, it's reported through to our IT service providers. That, if it's found to be malicious, is then circulated to the rest of the organisation to highlight that there has been a potential risk or an attempt to attack the organisation. And so people should be getting regular reminders as it comes up as to what a suspicious email looks like.
Sorry to push on this, but it feels a little bit like that is a reactive way of dealing with things as opposed to a proactive way. There are lots and lots of low-cost solutions to actually ensure that we minimise any risk whatsoever to the organisation, and it really doesn't feel like we're in that situation at the moment. Thank you.
I manage the data protection officer, Susan Hall, and Susan sends regular emails to staff to update them on changes in law and provide information. There is a hub where on the intranet where staff can go to look at a lot of policies and protocols on how to deal with data protection and cybersecurity issue. I also believe that training has been given to members on cybersecurity outside of officers, and I believe some of the members of this committee attended that cybersecurity training. Thank you, Chair.
I am on now. I'll draw stumps on this. There's some valid points raised. Thank you very much. Is it a new point or the previous point? Okay, well, let's deal with this and then we'll take a new point. It's been a long journey with the risk approach within the Combined Authority. It's not there yet, but it's now getting to a place where we can have these sort of discussions in a proper way. We have a question of a deep dive is been proposed on cybersecurity September. I'd ask if the points that have been raised by members in this part of the debate could be reflected by the internal auditor when they do their further review later in the year. Because the embedding process and how do you know it's being done is a challenge not just in this area but in all the changes that the combined authority is facing. So we need to keep our scrutinising eye on it and come back to it at future meetings. Okay? Thank you, Alison. Thank you. David.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. If I can come back, if I may, through the officer to Councillor Whelan about the question about changes in 4RISK. I've used 4RISK in the past for a good number of years, and as soon as somebody makes an entry in an update, that's captured, that date's captured. So the question would be, if somebody's reviewed it, that would actually be captured there and then, so it would be seen. 4RISK is a really good piece of software, really easy to use. But again, if I may, Chair, can I just touch on cyber security again? I know it's a different point, but it's the one about on the risk under the residual risk column where it's at a medium score of 3.2, which is 9. And the inherent score is very high, 5.4. And I've gone back to the risk management strategy that was approved by the board last September, and I think came to this committee as well. And I've seen on there that you've actually moved the likelihood, the impact, which is the first number, from a 5 in the red column down to a 3 in the medium column. And of course you've also reduced the likelihood. It's really difficult with a risk, no matter what controls you put in, is to reduce the likelihood of an event occurring. It's, you know, the impact of a cybersecurity event, if you had all the controls in the world, would still be really important and sort of devastating, I suppose, on the delivery of services through the combined authority. And what I'd like to see, please, when you bring the report back to September meeting, you say on cybersecurity, is could you give us some indication as to why the impact score has reduced, why you believe it's reduced from 5 down to 3, because I think that's a big change. The other thing that I'd like to say is that I don't think J is a control. The fact that you've got some funding doesn't mean anything. It's just the fact you've got some funding, you've got to do something with it. So that's not a control. And also, again, talking about, there's an issue about business continuity that internal audit have mentioned on page 104 of the pack, saying there's minimal assurance. Could we have some link in the cyber security, please, back to business continuity, because the two aren't separate, they need to be seen as being together. And one final point, if I can, because I had to go back, like I say, to September's paper, could we have an appendix in future that shows the risk scoring impacts and likelihoods and the sort of little grid that you've got, you know, because obviously you're not scoring 5.4 as 20, you might be scoring it as 21 or 19. I can't, you know, on that grid, in order to differentiate the scores that are on the risk register. And I think that'd be useful for members to look at and see in future, to see where these have come from and how they've actually been evaluated. Thank you.
Until September on your point about the impact assessment. Perhaps in the next month's paper you can bring that to light. So with putting that to one side, are there any reactions from officers which would be helpful at this stage?
Obviously, we will of course include those in the deep dive in September.
Nathan? Okay.
The only other thing that I would just mention is Appendix 3. I think is quite good for what you've mentioned, showing where the risk almost was the inherent, and it also shows where the risk currently is, the residual, now that the controls are in place. But we'll work with you to make sure that the appendices are improved, or we have an extra appendices for the next meeting if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Right, so there we've had the other side of the coin to my point at the beginning about continuity and discontinuity. This debate has been with three new minds on this subject, so thank you for that. My question is regards the deep dives, which is on page 42. It seems to be a lot. Now, we've only had one deep dive hitherto, and that was, we had a trial run with the finance team, and that proved our worth, because 2 or 3 days later, Rob contacted me to say he'd reflected on the debate that we'd had, and he'd taken a different judgment on the basis of our discussion. So the deep dive reassures us, and the debate sometimes will help. But it does seem with the next, the 18th of July, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the list. That seems quite a lot. I'm not sure how, on timing and method, what was in your minds in doing these deep dives, how long they would take.
We're happy to condense the list if that's what members would prefer, if you wanted to focus on one specifically. Our original thinking was, future funding. I think we need to focus on that as it's above risk appetite. As the improvement plan is coming to a key juncture, the final few months, we thought, because future funding is one of those improvement plan related risks, we could bring the 4 improvement plan related risks all together in July. But we're absolutely happy to take a steer on you on that, whether you would...
let it cook for a while, because I'm not quite sure. I mean, I assume the risk owner will come and talk to us.
Yes, that's the plan.
Which is the precedent that we have, and this is the time for the risk owner, because we're embedding it, and is it, the points were made about how do you know that what's on paper is actually happening in reality. Those are the benefits of the deep dive. I just can't, as the chair and time manager of our 3 hours in July, work out how long this is going to take. So could perhaps go offline, or do you have an answer for me?
I was just going to speak specifically to the funding risk. It might be that taking that slightly later in the year will allow a more full or a more updated position, because a lot of our future funding risk is associated with government funding, and of course there's a new government imminent.
I think the culture we already know is on the agenda. If members will leave it with me on time management, unless there's any particular ones that they would like to die in a ditch for, that would be fine. Sorry, go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, on the point of future viability, I think that is inherently linked to future funding, so that if Mr. Emery is proposing that we defer the future funding to later in the year, and I can see the merit in doing that, I think it would be logical to do the deep dive on future viability alongside the deep dive on future funding, because viability is very much about financial viability. And therefore, perhaps if for July we were to simply limit the deep dive on culture and governance value for money, and although the VFM part of it is a financial aspect, it's not really, it's more to do with the governance structure and the culture, and therefore I think that if we split it into 2 batches and we do culture and governance as one deep dive, and the future funding and future viability as a second deep dive later in the year, I think that would help us to make progress. I don't want us to just push the can down the road and not actually make that much progress on the deep dives.
I keep getting waved because I pressed the wrong button. Thank you, Nathan, for that. and for all the comments from colleagues, because I think it was a helpful debate. We now move on to, I'm not sure, how are we doing with the improvement plan streaming in?
She's trying to log on.
Ah,
She is here.
okay. So, yes, I forgot, forgive me, Angela's otherwise engaged. So, Louisa, you're going to bring us up to date with the improvement plan, is that right?
I certainly am. That's quite scary, that picture there, of seeing me that big. And I do apologise to everybody for being so large on that screen.
Don't worry about it. I'm much worse. Okay. Would you like to go ahead?
Good morning, everybody, members. Apologies for being late. Laptop updating security firewall was being updated today, of all days. But I was listening in on the phone, so did catch the meeting. I'm here on behalf of Angela Probert in terms of the improvement group work. Angela has prepared a report for this meeting that outlines where we are at the end of March. The next A&G meeting will get progress to date. At the end of March, you will see that we are green on 2 of our work streams, those being continuous improvement and the strategic ambitions and strategy and policy, and green amber on our culture work stream. That reflects the work being done with members and also across the combined authority. What our programme overall means is that we are highly likely to deliver the improvement plan to time, costs and quality. And the highlight report is appended at Appendix 1 for information. We've done significant work across all of the improvement work streams, and it's proving very positive. And there's been some great improvement work done over the last month. We're obviously focused on the fact that we only have until the end of July, and we are unsure what the potential change in government or new government will have in terms of impact on our best value notice. So we continue to focus on the work outlined in the best value notice from that we were given. What we have done in terms of culture to look at how we can continue to work across the combined authority. We have our first staff awards scheduled in June, and our performance appraisal system has been updated, and we are all currently in the process of completing our forward look into our appraisals. The partnerships work, we had a very successful conference at REEF, at UK REEF, where an investment prospectus was prepared from across all of the districts, and district partners attended, and some incredible feedback was returned from there. And we have a public affairs strategy being delivered to the June Combined Authority Board, which will take on board some of the learning from the UK REEF. And our continuous improvement work stream has completed all of the training for staff around procurement, project management, and the performance team and the strategy team have been further reinforced with additional staff being recruited. Our directorate business plans are now in place, and they have now a golden thread through our appraisal system. So we are confident that delivery is on target. We've engaged with DLUC. There are formal meetings taking place, and our final meeting is mid-July. So we are looking to have everything completed, evidence and information ready and available for there. The Independent Improvement Board is, excuse me, the Audit and Governance Committee have attended the IIB, the chair. You've attended the IIB and have been part of that meeting, and we've had an incredibly successful internal audit review of our procurement, which found no management activities to be required following that review, which I think gives substantial assurance that our procurement process and procedure is in place. It's now about the embedding of those processes and procedures. I'm happy to take any questions on any of the paper. So over to yourselves. Thank you. I can't hear anything. Apologies.
I speak and they're
Sorry.
leave it on all the time. We're asked to note progress from the against the going concern, the best value notice, and to note the chair of the independent independent improvement board comments. Does anybody have any points they wish to raise? David.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind that this is actually a question for external audit, bearing in mind that the initial concerns that resulted in the best value notice were concerns raised by external audit, I wonder whether external audit at this stage have a view on progress being made.
We're taking your sandwiches early.
Yes, you'll see in our reports following that we still have concerns around the value for money in terms of the governance and the arrangements around the best value notice. But we can see that progress has been made, so we will continue to monitor it. In our report in the 22-23 value for money, we still have a significant weakness, and it's very likely that that significant weakness will go into 23-24 as well, as the best value notice, the most recent one was January 2024. So it is something that we are monitoring and we are looking at. We are in the process of planning our value for money work for 23-24, where we will investigate what has been happening recently and where we're at with that risk.
Gary.
Yeah, just a sort of a question around progress and one thing is, how is the sort of shared ambition being communicated out publicly for awareness, and how is engagement being encouraged?
Janice? I mean, Louise.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of the shared ambition work, that's continued over the last 3 months. Nathan leads on that work stream. I see Nathan is in the meeting. We've engaged across all of the districts. We've engaged, we've also done some public engagement in terms of there's links on the website. So as soon as you click on the website, there's the opportunity to make comments about the region, how you feel about the region. And that work is ongoing. So we had a meeting this week with all of the districts where we looked at the shared ambition. The members are engaged in that piece of work later this month. And so are chief executives. There are a number of workshops that continue. It's then it's shared on, updates are shared at the Combined Authority Board, so there's access to those papers there. I don't know whether, Nathan, you have anything that you're able to add in terms of how we are publicising or are sharing that shared ambition work wider than local authority partners?
Yeah, thanks, Louisa. So, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of engagement. We've done lots of workshops. So, to date, we've done 2 large-scale stakeholder workshops consisting of over 60 people in both of those. We've got a 3rd stakeholder workshop coming up early next month. We've had 2 board and chief executive workshops, and again, another one of those coming up next Thursday. We've engaged with committee members as well, a workshop last week, and we've got a working group made up of constituent authority officers across the region, and they've really been helping us to drive it forward. It's been a co-production approach that we've taken. So right from the start, it's those constituent authority officers who have helped shape the scope for the shared ambition, right from prior to procuring all the way through to today, and they'll continue when we get the final draft and help us to complete the work as well. Yeah, sorry, there's nothing else really to add, but happy to take any question on that.
Okay. Right, I don't see any other comments. I've got a query in my mind. At the event yesterday, the chief executive said, and the best value notice finishes in July, putting the hiatus of democracy, which is happening in a week or two's time. Is that true? At the moment, Louisa, that the discussions with DLUC, God, I hate having to say those, that acronym, that July is the end date for what you might call special measures through the best value notice, or is that optimism?
The best value notice ends on the 31st of July. It automatically comes to an end at the 31st of July. So unless civil service colleagues in DLUC decide, or the government decide, that they want that to continue, or they wish to give us another best value notice, they would have to issue another best value notice. They don't run concurrently. They issue a new one each time. So that's what's happened. We had our first one, that ended. We then were issued a new best value notice. This one will end on the 31st. If we're going to get another best value notice, we should know that we should be made aware that we're going to be issued with a further notice before this one ends, we would hope. But with the sort of election, obviously that may delay things. But yes, the best value notice ends on the 31st of July automatically.
Yeah, but I didn't detect from that you've had the current team in London. Have they or have they not indicated that will be the end?
They keep it. They very rarely will give any indication of where they are in terms of will it end, will it not end. So no, at this point we are not aware from DLUC whether it will end or not.
Rob Henry. Thank you, Lisa.
It was just to make the point that the decision on best value notice is a ministerial decision, not one made by civil servants. And so ultimately the person making that decision may not currently be the minister.
Okay. I think what's in my mind is we're in a sort of closed loop now, because if you read or you listen in conversation, if it's not on paper, the three outside regulator stakeholders, if you like, refer to the other one because there's a best value notice, because there was a letter of whatever, because there was a qualified opinion by internal audit. So I'm just was trying to get a sense as to whether we think the combined authority is going to be has done enough to convince somebody in that circle that is okay or not. Does Janice, as the new mind, have anything to tell me?
If I had the answer, Chair. No, I think it's as Louisa said. I mean, essentially, the IIB will have a significant part to play in this, and their reports back to DLUC, because they are the independent body that's established to support, challenge, interrogate, and advise the combined authority regarding the best value notice. So I think their report and their findings, together with what is coming out of key areas such as Audit and Governance Committee, such as what is being said at the board, our external auditors and indeed our internal auditors, taking all that information together, they will then have those conversations as well with DLUC, as well as ourselves providing that. So there is a big evidence pack being put together to support this, because we can't just go off rhetoric. So there is an evidence pack as well that goes together. There's also an internal audit review that commenced this week as well to look at certain areas. So we're looking at all the areas where those reviews, those evidence can be put in place. But ultimately, we'll put that forward, and DLUC, as Rob was saying, will take that to the Minister. But in the absence of any decision, it will fall away by the 31st of July. That is all it stands to. But we will be hopeful that we get actually a positive decision, because I'd rather have a positive decision than it just falling away. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It strikes me that it's a procedural matter that the best value notice falls away on the 31st of July, and it is a political matter as to whether or not a minister is in a position to make a decision one way or the other, and clearly no minister is going to make any decision now, and it's extremely unlikely that the new minister, once appointed, even assuming he's in office, or he or she is in office before the end of July, is going to be in a position to make that decision before the end of July. I think what we have to assume is that the current best value notice will fall away on the 31st of July, but there may be a hiatus before a new one is issued, and we shouldn't work on the assumption that once the 31st of July has passed, that all is well and good. And the key question I would have is the Independent Improvement Board working on the assumption that it's going to wind itself up in August, or is it still working on the assumption it's got further work to do? If so, then in all likelihood there will be a new best value notice, but it might not be issued until September, once the new minister has been able to assess the situation and come to a conclusion. And does it make a difference to us and our role whether that notice is still in place on the 1st of August, or whether it comes back into effect in sometime in September? I suspect it shouldn't make any difference to what the authority is doing, and therefore we should simply assume that there will be a new best value notice unless we hear otherwise, and the fact that it hasn't been issued before the 31st of July is purely an impact of there being a general election next month. And hopefully we will have a better idea by September. If no best value notice has been issued in September, we would expect that there'd be something from the ministry to say that they won't be issuing one. But at this moment in time, I don't think you would get any clarity out of the ministry, and I very much doubt you'll get it before the end of July.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I know I was trying to pin down the oracle at Delphi here, and I've been trying to do that since the intervention by the external auditors way back when. I think it does make a difference, though, because we want, do we not, the executive and the CPCA focused on doing its business. And we all know that when you're in special measures, you divert a lot of management time to dealing with the regulators. And therefore, I think until the combined authority has managed to get its escutcheon uncleansed, they are being diverted and at senior level in a way which isn't helpful. I mean, I talked about that from my own executive experience when you're under the cosh. So it does make a difference if these constraints are continued to be put on them. But our job is to get those assurances by scrutinising and encouraging the organisation to do what they need to do. I don't know where the Independent Improvement Board sits, because we didn't discuss that when I had my grilling, or I grilled them, a bit of both. Rob.
Just to provide some reassurance that the council is entirely right in terms of the work won't just stop. We're a best value authority. We have a duty for continuous improvement. The work schedules and project plans that sit within the continuous improvement work streams extend well beyond the end of the current best value notice. There's no expectation that we'll just all breathe a sigh of relief and nothing will continue if nothing issued by the end of July. And indeed, the Independent Improvement Board, I believe, are in place till the end of the current financial year, regardless of what happens.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Well, interest.
Last item.
Yeah, what you just said, spoke about. Yeah, I mean, appreciate your interest in this, Chair, because it's important. But I wondered if we could write to them, the assessors, and ask if we can have clarity, or is that a question that we wouldn't want to ask because we might not want the answer? I thought the former, but I don't know.
You could have a go at Dan later. Both Dans. We've got two Dans, external and internal audit. When this process began, I had a meeting with the guys and girls in DLUC, and I finally concluded, having spent 10 years in Whitehall myself, I was wasting my time, because you won't get an answer, and the point was rightly made that they will duck and weave anyway because it's the minister's decision. And when we've tried to press our friends for external audit, you've got the same answers Dan gave us earlier in this meeting, on the one hand and on the other hand. So I don't think it's incumbent on us to pursue the end of this journey in an active way, but it is to try and understand where the end of this journey is, and that the reaching of the end of the journey is being done in a way that responds to the concerns that were raised. So it's, yeah, no. Okay. Definitely the last item, because we've had an hour now.
It's probably just going back to Rob's points about continuous improvement. I think for me, I find it disappointing if things just stopped because there was no notice in place. And I think as an organisation, under continuous improvement, it talks about agile ways of work, and agile ways of working is all about continuous improvement. Maybe it should be a continuous independent improvement board or something like that. So we shouldn't take our eye off the ball there. Don't want to end up in this situation again.
No, true. But yeah, and I've always, and we've discussed in this group in the last year, that the colours on the RAG ratings from the improvement plan updates that we're getting are pretty green. And we've had the discussion that's because the work has been done. We have reviewed the procurement, and we have rewritten it, and we've done this, and we've done that. But the embedding, that I think is where our role as a committee lies in the future, from the points that Alison made and others. But I don't think it's helpful to the organisation that they're so distracted to do. I don't know how much time all this takes, but getting on with the job and the continuous improvement is quite different from getting on with the job and putting my heart on my sleeve and going to these various. I've done it in aviation. It's very difficult. The regulator's role is what it is, and the quicker that the organisation can convince the regulators, the better. I think that's enough philosophy. But thank you. Right. Thank you very much, Louisa. And I noticed that your image disappeared. That's
That's a relief. I'm back.
Okay, thanks very much. And you can
Thank you.
retire hurt now. Okay. That takes us. So we've taken a lot of external audits themes in the earlier debate. So Dan, if I could invite you to introduce Dan Cook from EY to introduce the external audit report, at which we are to comment and note.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report starts on page 57 of your papers. This is an interim report on our value for money reporting for 22-23. So it's quite backwards looking. You've heard some more up-to-date information on the improvement framework from Louisa. But this is our assessment of the 22-23 value for money arrangements at the Combined Authority. So I'll take you first to page 65 of the papers, which is page 9 of our report. This is where we summarise the reporting criteria under the value for money. So under the NAO code of 2020 that we have to consider each year in the value for money arrangements at the authority. So we've got financial sustainability, where we did not identify any significant risks and therefore no significant weaknesses. At the bottom, we've got improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Again, no significant risks identified and therefore no significant weaknesses. But under the governance arrangements, we identified 2 significant risks, and both of those resulted in significant weaknesses in value for money arrangements. Those are 2 things that you've already heard about today and will have heard from in other audit committees. So the first is the best value notice, and that's a continuation of our value for money reporting from 21-22, which we reported to you at the end of March this year. So that's a continuation as the best value notice went through 22-23. We then had a second significant weakness in relation to findings from internal audit, where they identified weaknesses in the framework of governance, risk management and control in their 22-23 annual opinion. So if I then take you to page 70 and 71, there's a little bit more information about the 2 weaknesses that we identified, and we have recommendations in there. Recommendation in relation to the best value notice is just the recommendations from the best value notice, and you've heard an update on those today. And then in terms of the recommendations around the improvement in the governance issues identified by internal audit, they are some of the recommendations that internal audit had already flagged in the reports that they had raised their weaknesses in. If you go to page 81 and 82 of the papers, so pages 25 and 26 of our report, there are responses from management in this report to those weaknesses and areas that they have already done to address some of those risks. So I'm happy to take questions on those if there are any questions, but finally just wanted to flag that between pages 74 and 80, so pages 18 to 27 within our report, we have commented on the summary of arrangements that we've considered throughout the value for money work. So that covers the areas around financial sustainability and economy, efficiency and effectiveness as well. So yes, happy to take any questions. I've heard some of the comments in this committee around updates on where we're at with the best value notice. So I will look to see if we can bring some updates from an external audit perspective to the next meeting. Hopefully the partner will be able to join us, because I know it's the partners who are in discussions with DLUC, and we'll probably be able to give you some more up-to-date information.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. And when we've had this discussion, could you then finish off with, this is, I always get wet. This year in which the commentary, we're not having an audit of the accounts. I think it would be helpful to members when we finish the commentary, just to understand the implications, because there was a question at the meeting the session I was at yesterday, what happens about moving into a new accounting year and how we can be confident we haven't lost something on the way. Okay, open the floor. Gary.
Yes, It sort of follows on from what we were just talking about with continuous improvement in there. But I go back to the items on page 7, page 70, the recommendations, and the word continue to is used consistently in there. And to me, that brings it back to, noting your comments about the distraction that being in an improvement period brings. But I think we do have to ask and push for continuous improvement being embedded into the culture and becoming part of business as usual there. The other point noted here, it does actually say, continue to engage regularly with the department at official level throughout the period of this notice. And I think from what we've been told, it doesn't appear that that's happened, unless I've misunderstood. Yeah?
I think I might ask my right about that point.
Sorry, yes, there is a relationship manager with Department for Levelling Up Housing. I should have just said deluxe, shouldn't I? Communities. So yes, there is a relationship manager, and regular meetings do take place with that individual. Thank you.
If I can, please, one of the actions under the, well, I'll pick page 82, which has got the management response responses rather. In the second column, the recommendation, the very last one, improving the processing of accounts payable supplier information changes. The management response just says work is ongoing in separating the accounts payable changes process from that of the new supplier process so they can easily be differentiated. My understanding from reading of the improving the process requirement is that there's no checks in place, but I could be wrong, and I'm brand new here, and I don't know if there's been a discussion around it before, but is that answer sufficient for the recommendation that's been made?
Probably would hand over to internal audit on that one to see if it addresses the concerns they raised in their accounts payable audit. But I think from what we've seen, it did address what was raised in terms of errors in updating supplier information within the accounts payable system. But yeah, we'll hand over to Dan if he's up to speed, or Rob, who might be able to help.
Rob might be the quickest, whilst Dan collects his thoughts.
I can certainly talk about it. I can't actually answer the question because, of course, is the answer sufficient, which I can't give because I'm the officer. So the finding was around, as it says, the accounts payable supplier change process. And at the time of the audit, there was no specific separable process. We just used the same form for setting up a new supplier, for setting up the changes to supplier. And there were a couple of weaknesses found there. One was you couldn't tell what had changed because it was just a whole set of new data. And the second was 2 of the sample taken hadn't been signed as we'd done the check before putting this on the system. The team had done the check, but we hadn't got the documentation to prove it. And you're correct, I didn't include that in that element of the response purely for space, because as you can see, we're running out there. There is a more detailed management action included in the audit action update, which Dan is coming to in a moment, and indeed on the audit action tracker, which I believe you have an item on later on your agenda.
Yes, specifically on the accounts payable review, it was actually a joint review whereby, so it was a key financial controls review, but it looks at treasury management and accounts payable. So we agreed 5 medium priority actions within that review, and in our follow-up that we undertook this year, we confirmed that 4 of those actions have been fully implemented and 1 had been partially implemented, but we re-agreed a management action. So I think what we can say is, look, we'd seen evidence of 80% of those medium priority actions that were originally agreed had been fully implemented. 1 was still ongoing.
Okay. Is this an energy-saving timeout? Okay, we're back in the light. Good. Any other points? Okay, could I take us to page 65, which is the reporting governance, the reporting criteria. We've got, this is my circular argument DLUC issue a best value notice, which was after the external auditor issued an intervention, and then being led in that direction, we get internal audit doing the same. And I'm reminded of Oh, What a Lovely War, one staff officer jumps over the other staff officer's back. I just encourage the regulators not to just feed off each other's opinions, because there is a risk of groupthink which clouds the clarity of what the combined authority is achieving. That's just from the pulpit. You don't need to answer that. Could I just pick you up, Dan, before we go on to the bit about the accounts? When we were chatting beforehand, for members who have not been involved, EY moved up the relationship management with us to partner level. Us, I mean the combined authority, because of the severity and the unusualness of the situation in which the combined authority is in. And I thought, when I was having a chat with him just before the meeting, that I saw a glimmer of light, because I said it's time that I needed to talk again with the external auditors, because I've been keeping a clear separation whilst this process has been going on. And Dan said that, well, probably Mark Hodgson would come back, who is, I'm never sure of he's not a partner though, I don't think, is he? Is he a partner?
Mark will be coming.
Okay.
A partner, yes.
So he'll be coming back to the work with us, but as in the role of a partner supervising this relationship.
Yes,
that's the bit I missed. I had hoped that the partners were withdrawing from the stage, and I was trying to interpret that, but I interpreted it incorrectly. Okay, that's good. Now, can you elucidate for somebody like me what the accounting implications are of not having an audit of the accounts and starting a new year? Because I've heard it asked a couple of times and I have no answer to the question. Can you do it in simple terms?
Yeah, I can try, Chair. I probably won't have a simple answer either. So obviously, before the general election was announced, there were consultations in place with DLUC and with CIPFA around moving forward local authority audits due to the backlog of audits. The general election has brought some uncertainty to that. The parliamentary process of resetting and recovering the local audit market has stalled as a result. The legislation was not set to put the backstop dates firmly in place. So until a new government is formed and they relook at those, we are unable to provide any updates on that. But from an EY perspective, we are going to continue as we had set out previously. So that is to audit the most recent accounts that are available. So for the Combined Authority, that is 23-24 accounts. And we will start that audit next month in July and through August with the finance team to gain assurance over the 23-24 financial statements. So the most recent, most up-to-date information that we have available. So until we get some further guidance on what that means for the unaudited 22-23 accounts, there isn't any more information we can bring you at this stage, fortunately.
Okay. So does that mean we're safe or unsafe? Sorry, it was on my neck.
Just can I clarify, if you're doing an audit on the 23-24, but you don't have audited 22-23, what assumptions and qualifications are you making around the opening balances? I appreciate that what this does do, and I'm aware that's a problem across many authorities, is that it at least gets us to the point of being able to understand that what has happened within 23-24 is acceptable, but the validity of your closing balance is entirely dependent on the validity of your opening balance. And does that mean that there will be a qualified opinion based on that? And how will that impact 24-25 going forward? Because if you haven't got your opening and closing balances confirmed and audited, then the same issue is going to arise in 24-25, or is there a mechanism for avoiding that?
perhaps a much better way of describing my concern.
So ultimately that is the million-dollar question, and that is what the consultations were looking at before the election was announced. That is the bit where we currently do have the gap. So it is the opening balances from the unaudited 22-23 accounts, which everyone is working on, and hopefully there'll be some steer once we've got that guidance. But yes, we are obviously aware that that is a risk, and the plan previously was that there would be disclaimer opinions for a few years while we build up the assurance on those balances and ultimately the reserve position of the authority, because they're the figures that would not have been audited in previous years. So again, something that is being worked on, and we will come back to you once we do have an answer on how we rebuild that assurance for unaudited years.
So you're going to start the audit for, I always get this, 23-24 in 2 weeks' time. But you may not have an answer to that question. So how does that reconcile itself?
So yes, that is correct. There is obviously a lot of work that we can do on 23-24. We can audit all the transactions within 23-24 and most of the balances, because most of the balances in 23-24 will not have figures brought forward from 22-23, but there is the gap around the reserves position, which is the area that we will get stuck on, yes.
Okay, so it's productive, and otherwise
Yes.
it's an open question, and you'll bring it to the next meeting and update.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to come back on that, in terms of opening balances, you've got your reserve balances and you've got your assets which factor into your balances. Will you be able to do an audit of the actual assets on available to particularly tangible assets available to the authority, and therefore be able to say that the gap, as if you like, is in terms of the financial reserves brought forward, which you cannot validate?
Exactly that, yes. So where there are assets such as debtors or physical assets, then we would be able to audit those balances as at the 31st of March 2024. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Alice?
Just picking up on there, as I understand it, you know, the splitting the audit into two completely separate or three completely separate sections. One is around reserves, which is always going to be complicated because it's affected by everything. The individual transactions, while you will have a year of transactions which may not have been looked at, you have a year where you will be looking at, and presumably you'll be looking at all the controls that are in place around that, which will give a certain level of assurance. But of course, the actual asset balances, for want of a better word, even the provisions and so forth, will be auditable as of that point. As I understand what the proposals were, would see 3 to 4 years of a disclaimed opinion, and I think it's important to understand that that disclaimed opinion is a disclaimed opinion. It is not a negative audit opinion. So I think we have to be really careful that there are, you know, there is still the potential that you would qualify on the basis of the actual testing that you're able to do, but you would also have this disclaimer irrespective of that, and that is likely to take, as I understand it, from what was proposed, 3 to 4 years. I'm assuming that there is absolutely no indication at the moment, certainly I've not seen anything, as to when, you know, this or secondary legislation, I think it was, that they were looking at to do this, is going to be brought back.
Exactly that, yes. On the point around the accounts, yeah, that's exactly where we would be in terms of what we can audit and what we can't. And yes, we don't know when that legislation will come back and be resolved.
And when would we be due to, I mean, how have we communicated to the public, or how will it be communicated to the public that the accounts are not being audited for this period, and this sort of language and these distinctions, so that lay people can comprehend that this is a mess we're in nationally, not a mess we're in locally?
say that that's a discussion that's been had both at the M10 finance leads and the local finance leads discussion. So there will, whatever the message is, we will make sure it is consistent across our network.
Okay. That was the answer I wanted. Alison?
One of the problems we actually have is that the general public generally do not understand the complexities of how we as accountants talk. They don't grasp the terminology. What is satisfactory in terms of audit is very different to what a lay person would think of satisfactory as actually meaning, for example. So actually trying to think, because obviously the 23-24 accounts should be published before long. We're already in a situation whereby the publishing of the accounts is not going to happen. The audit is going to get underway. Everything is still going to be well behind. Communication with the public in a language that the public actually understand is something I think we really, really need to think very, very carefully about. I think it needs to be, very concise language, setting out what the problems are. And this is, it's not here, it's the entire, or it feels like it's the entire audit sector, not just local authority audit sector either. The, private company audits also seem to be struggling like anything to get stuff done. So it is a real major communications issue. And can I suggest that we actually get someone who doesn't really understand all of this but knows how to communicate, to learn what they've got to actually say so that we can get proper communication to the public?
All the constituent authorities in the same boat? Yes. Well then, could we put an action on CPCA to coordinate with the other authorities exactly on that point? A plain English explanation. Okay. I'm drawing this to a close soon.
I think we need to get PSAA involved in that messaging as well, though, so it's consistent across the country, like Alison said.
Can we?
Leave, and maybe the EY can confirm or correct me, I believe that 385 out of 393 councils are in the same position.
It's the national mess we're in, but it's, I think Alison's point about what people understand and the fact we're not too sure. Yeah, okay, that's a very valid...
It's fundamentally a COVID problem.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Good, so that's an action, and could you report back appropriately? My last point then on this, as we're now getting to halfway through the meeting and we got down to, we're only item 8, so we have to pedal a bit harder, is I got chided, I think, by the partner, Janet Dawson, when I said, have you qualified the value for money? And you told me that it's a commentary, it's not an opinion. What, in simple language, do we say about your value for money commentary? Do we say it's a negative?
I think we call it an except for reporting. So we say that value for money is okay, except for these two items that we would report in our audit opinion. And
what does the lay person think?
Good question.
But I think this is, so as far as I'm concerned, it's qualified, but it's not a technical term. And I just think it is a reminder how difficult it is to find terminology which encapsulates intricate and complicated things. Okay, so I'm on song today. Right, that's it. That one's done. Thank you very much, Dan. And would you convey my earlier comments to Mark so we can get together? Thank you. Right. We're now on item 9, which is the internal audit progress report and their annual report of 23-24. And we've got Dan from RSM to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can take you to page 87 in the pack. which is the key messages from our progress report. So just conscious, got some new members here today. So the progress report is a standing item on every Audit and Governance Committee agenda, twofold purpose. One is to update the committee on the progress that we've made against the plan that you approve. The second sort of most substantive point within the progress report would be to update you on any findings that may impact my year-end opinion. Now, just happens to be today that obviously you've got my year-end opinion, so there's not a huge amount of commentary in the progress report in relation to that, because obviously the opinion's on the report. So key messages then: 2 reports finalised since the last meeting, subsidiary governance and the procurement improvement plan that's been mentioned today. We've just got 2 further reports that are in draft, so we're just waiting responses on the action plans from officers, but I anticipate those being finalised fairly soon. That completes the full programme of the 23-24 plan. In terms of 24-5, I think we've got the one review undertaken, and then obviously the full schedule of work agreed and within the plan. So Appendix A at page 91 just summarises all of the work we've undertaken for 23 for the respective assurance opinions when those findings have been reported through to this committee. And then Appendix B at page 93, that is the summary of the 24-5 programme, the respective status of those reviews, and then the target audit committee when we intend on bringing the final reports through to you. So I think, Chair, I'll take the paper as read. I wasn't proposing to say any more on the progress report.
We'll have a little pause then, Dan. To try and make the agenda look more palatable, I put these 2 items under 9 as opposed to having 9 and 10, and we were ending up at 22 or something. I have one comment on it, but is anybody on the progress report before we go on to the annual report? Has anybody got any comments? Okay, well, I'm going to have huff and puff at the combined authority. 3 annual reports from this committee, we pointed out that the governance of subsidiary companies was inadequate. It took 3 years before something happened, and now something's happened and it's still qualified. I think I would like we even had the mayor, who's personally was leading the what was the shareholder board, came to this very meeting. Now we don't have a shareholder board, we have a investment board. So that's very, keep changing the names. Who is in charge of subsidiary companies?
So that would be my team provides support.
But who is accountable?
So accountable would be, can you hear me? Yeah, accountable member-wise would be the investment committee, who under the constitution have the responsibility for ensuring that the governance is as it should be.
So who is the chair of the investment committee?
It would be the mayor.
Is it time to invite him back?
The investment committee hasn't met yet.
No.
Well, I think that might hangs the tail. Okay. Could we invite him back, please, if his diary doesn't permit it in July, then in September?
Okay.
I mean, Alison and I did not get off to a good start this morning, and she was harumphy when she came in. But I think she's convinced now, perhaps, I hope, that this is serious stuff we're into, and we do understand what isn't going on. And I don't know how many times the chair of the audit can report it, and we get a substandard thing. So, slightly in better language, could you convey that to the mayor? And either at, for next meeting, July or September, I'd like him to come back to us, as he did before, on the management of subsidiary companies, bring whoever he needs to bring with him to convince us that things are better than they've ever been. Sorry, that was me being a bit cross. Okay, right, let's get on to the report, please.
Sorry, Chair, so 9B, the annual report?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I didn't expect an answer from you on that subject.
If I may then, page 98 of your pack. So this is obviously the year-end opinion for year ended 31st of March 24. So under the public sector internal audit standards, I'm required to provide an opinion on the risk management, governance and internal control arrangements. Now, if you look at Appendix A in this report, that details the 4 opinions that are available to me. That's just in line with our methodology, but in effect, what it's saying there is I could give you give the authority 4 opinions, 2 are positive, 2 are negative. What I've agreed to do exceptionally this year is actually split those opinions down individually into risk management, governance and internal control. Ordinarily, I would give an overarching opinion. But I found myself in the position that what I wanted to be able to do was highlight where I felt there had been some positive progress, and that specifically came through in terms of the internal control arrangements, where I felt that I could provide a positive opinion in that regard. But we've still got a qualified opinion in relation to risk management and to governance. And for those that haven't been on the committee previously, the last 2 financial years I've issued qualified opinions overall at the year end. So again, just in terms of page 98, I've incorporated just those couple of sentences in bold, which again are sort of non-standard wording that I've added in here, just to make it clear that whilst the opinion in relation to risk and governance is negative, I have seen significant and positive progress in a number of areas, and I think that's sort of right to acknowledge that within this report. Page 100 through to 105, that incorporates all of the factors and findings which have informed indeed those opinions. So I appreciate some of you have not been on the committee throughout the year, but what that does is gives you the summary conclusion findings that have come through to each and every meeting. The 2 reports that I would say that are still in draft, I've included the draft commentary in here in relation to both of those. So I think that's the IT change and project management review and the follow-up review. That commentary is on page 105. Just note that those 2 are still in draft. But there's, I guess the sort of the most helpful summary is perhaps on 102, which just summarises the total number of reviews we've undertaken, the assurance opinion that we've provided, whether that's negative, whether that's positive. Page 106, again, I think is just relevant for the committee to note that what I've then suggested is those are the areas that I think should be considered for flow through to the annual governance statement in terms of significant governance issues. And then the remainder of the report is fairly standard report, but I would just draw to your attention just at page 108, we have been asked to undertake some additional work throughout 23-4. Ahead of accepting any of those engagements, I would always have the conversation, or I did at the time with Nick, would do that with Janice and Rob going forward. Before we accept any engagement, we would satisfy ourselves that there's no sort of conflict in terms of me being able to provide that opinion, but it's just important that I mention that. And just again, it's a requirement of any contract we've got, but we remain fully compliant with the public sector internal audit standards. That commentary is on page 108. So, yes, in summary, as I say, we've got another qualified opinion, but for the reasons I explained in terms of what I've done on right at the front end of the report, we have seen some positive steps, some improvements in a number of areas, but not enough in those areas around the risk management and the governance arrangements for me to be able to give an unqualified opinion in those areas. So I'll perhaps pause there.
Thanks very much, Dan. Could you just tell me how usual it is to have 3 successive qualified opinions in local government?
It is not unprecedented, but it is unusual.
You should be on the hustings. Okay. And I know, colleagues, that there was quite a bit of debate between the Combined Authority and the internal auditor in the preparing of the opinion, which I saw and welcomed as a good sign. And I think we should appreciate the step that the internal auditor's taken to try and show the areas in which the great work that's been going on for 18 months has produced the goods, but not enough goods in the Combined Authority as a whole to get an unqualified opinion. So with those remarks, I open the floor. We are required to note and comment. Asked to note, we're not required to do anything, we're asked to note and comment. Okay, go on.
Thank you for the work on this, and thank you for noting the positive actions that have actually happened. One of the reasons I'm sort of struggling with this a little bit is personally, as an accountant, I would be somewhat ashamed not to see the improvements happening fast enough. 3 years does seem an awful long time for us not to be getting anywhere. Chair, is there anything that can be done to encourage getting into a position whereby this does not happen again? You know, so next year is in a much better position. 3 years have gone by and it still isn't there. It feels like something has got to change.
Well, and those who were on the committee at the time when we had, I think it was, I can't remember which bit of Her Majesty's celebration, but it was on the eve of one of the Jubilees when I received a letter from the external auditor on the Friday before we were all going to do whatever we were going to do. And that was, this is quite, we're in 24 now, this was June 22. So if we take these 3 qualified internal audit opinions, we are talking about, let's get this right, this is 23, 24, 22, 23, 21, 22. So the first one was a harbinger. Is anything going to be done? The highly serious, unusual and deeply thought through intervention by the external auditor was that something needs to be done. And you line that with the work that was going on at the time, then that gives you your second qualified internal opinion. Without the auditors doing their job, and the intervention by the external auditor was the doing of the job, we wouldn't have had the catharsis to which we're now coming to an end. I can never say never, there's no, for 3 reports in a row, we, my report, our report, pointed out about the subsidiary companies weren't working. You could only tell the system, but this isn't a ranting thing. This is the evidence. When is the organisation going to do something? The organisation didn't do anything, really, didn't recognise the severity of the challenges they faced.
2, 2.
Apologise to members of the public that we had we ended our Zoom call for technical reasons. It took us a while to put it back on. I can assure you that what happened in the interim was not any material decisions, so you haven't missed anything. Okay, but we have completed the item 9. No, we haven't. I'm sorry, we have one last question on item 9. I'm reminded by my new independent colleague. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think it comes back, the question I was asking is going to come back in effect to this issue about continuous improvement that we've talked about before. And again, the issue about we've had 3 qualified, if I use that word, internal audit opinions. Can I go back to Appendix B, please, on page 110? And again, from my point of view, because obviously I'm new to this, in my first meeting, the business continuity planning, which is a first audit there, has got minimal assurance, and it's obviously got 14 actions. The thing that's missing from this report is whether or not those actions have been introduced, and were they introduced on time. Because the issue is that if that report, and I don't know when, maybe internal audit will give me an indicator as to when that audit was completed. But if it was completed 12 months ago, say, it was a first one in last year's audit plan, and all the actions had to be agreed by December, and they had been, would we in effect be saying that's a minimal assurance level for that audit? Because we've made 14 actions, they've all been introduced, so we could actually say now it's reasonable. And that information's not in this report, and I think it needs to be, so that we can get a steer as to whether or not it still is minimal assurance, or that insurance level should increase.
Perhaps I should put that in context in the way that we've handled these reports up to now. We only ask for summaries, and we get the insights to where they're good, bad, or indifferent, and the number of recommendations. A working assumption is that management and internal audit have agreed the dates of when work will be done, and for the first time last year we actually had a paper which was tracking those that were in arrears, and I think there were 5. So our assumption is, and what I've been familiar with elsewhere as well as here, is they've agreed it will be done, and will be reported back to us if there's a backlog. And we're currently doing that annually, and I think we've got a paper later which we might want to think about that again. On the question of having implemented all the recommendations, do you then say it's not a minimal insurance? I'd look for advice, but it seems to me that at the time it was a minimal insurance, and that doesn't change the price of fish. But Dan, you may be able to elucidate better than I.
Yes, I was just double checking actually the... sorry, just 1 second, and I can tell you when it was... I can hopefully tell you when the report was actually issued in draft. But in summary, we do carry out a follow-up review each year, but that will be on a sample of management action. So I think there's a recommendations tracker that management do keep that gives management's assessment of where they believe they are in implementing that action. But our annual report will only comment on the actions that we've followed up through our follow-up review. And the final report, for example, sorry, I've only got the final report date. I was looking for the fieldwork date, but the final report on this business continuity review was 27th of February. So, but obviously by inference, it was a more back-ended review. So hence, there was only really a month before the year end to sort of implement those 14 actions that were agreed within that review. So unlikely, I would suggest.
We haven't had any signals that management are not doing their stuff. And I do chide, I've always chided management. If they agree the date with the internal auditor, and if the internal auditor is happy with the date, then that's reasonable. But they shouldn't choose a date which they can't deliver, because that's very bad. And so we're novice at tracking, and we'll come back to that later. Does that help, David?
I can understand what you've done, but again, I think certainly as members we'd like to, well, certainly I'd like to see that the actions have been introduced on time, because again, that's the issue. Even though they might have been introduced a day later, a month later, 6 months later, I think that's something that's key. Even if internal audit are only doing an exception review, maybe just sort of the high risk actions.
Well, that's exactly what we do. We have a report from management, whether we've had one so far, that whether they've of any outstanding recommendations that were not completed on time, and we have the opportunity to question officers as to why they haven't done it.
Well, in that case,
The question is, do we need to see it more than annually?
yes.
Well, we're taking a strategic approach, but I'm not sure the value, but if that's what members would want, maybe we can have a look at that again. But unless there are things that are evidence of concerning, we have this balance between how much do we not be strategic and how much do we follow it on a blow-by-blow account. And we can take that each time we see the report, we have an opportunity to discuss that. Okay. When are we next due to have a report on the outstanding actions not completed by their time?
I believe that's one of the items on the agenda today, is to discuss when you would like to next see it and whether you want it more frequently.
In a moment or two we can have another go at that. Thank you. For all involved and for the debate. And now we're on item 10. Am I speaking? Yes, which is constitution amendments. For new members, we did get through a rhythm where the combined authorities stored up constitutional amendments, and we had one meeting and a session to eat the elephant whole. We've moved away from that, and so the advice I have is that we should do them as they appear, and that's what we've got today. So I'll hand over to Edwina, and we have to today agree or not to recommend what's been put before us to the Combined Authority Board as an amendment to the Constitution. Edwina.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so there are two recommendations in the paper that's before the committee. One is a delegation to the Chief Executive Officer, and the other is to the Assistant Director for Human Resources. So the delegations that has been sought for the Chief Executive Officer is contained in paragraph 2.1, and effectively that's seeking delegation for the CEO to be able to engage with mayoral candidates during pre the election and during the election period. The reason that this has been sought is that if the committee will remember from lessons learned previously from lessons learned. Yeah. Okay. So from lessons learned from previously, the Combined Authority wants to be in a position that when there is a new mayor elected, or if the mayor that is incumbent remains after next year's elections, that the Chief Executive has had an opportunity to look at, for example, the manifesto, to be able to work with them so that when they get into the new role, the Combined Authority and officers are in a position to deal with the changes, to avoid a situation where a new mayor or the incumbent comes in and there is a bit of a disjointed approach to things. So that's the reason why the delegation is sought for the Chief Executive Officer. Ordinarily, I suppose maybe the question may be asked, why is this delegation being sought? But unfortunately, it's not in the Constitution, and it doesn't give clarity. So to ensure that there's clarity and there's good governance, this is why this request, the delegation is before this committee. Attached to the report is a protocol for the CEO and also officers in engaging with mayoral candidates. And as you can see, that has limitations, so it's not a case that the Chief Executive Officer or other officers can do whatever they like. There are limitations in there, and I will not go through the protocol for communications with candidates. I'll take that as read, and I will leave it there, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Edwina. I just let members know that out of the work around the Code of Conduct hearing, there was a recognition that the preparation for potential, preparation for the change of mayoral office needed more work to be done because there wasn't a proper induction process for the new mayor, and this is I see this as part and parcel of it. So, in the interest of time, unless there are significant points, I would ask you to agree this. Okay. Next.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So to item 10B, which deals with appointment to external or outside bodies. In the Constitution, the Combined Authority Board is responsible for appointing members to committees. However, as part of good governance and clarity, it's recommended by myself that there should be specific wording in the Constitution that makes it clear what is to be done, or how the process for appointing members to external organizations and what is expected of those members. So there is also, just bear with me 1 second, there is a protocol as well which is attached, and it sets out the process of appointing members. I will leave that as read as well, and I will answer any questions for any members do you wish to answer.
Again, in the interest of time, it's the material comments. There are.
Chair, just briefly, the very final bullet point on the protocol for outside bodies. So as you've heard me say this years gone by, we seem to use combined authority board and the combined authority almost interchangeably. But I can't see the very final bullet point where members appointed will provide regular update to the combined authority board on any matters either the member, the mayor, the combined authority or statutory officers. What do we mean by combined authority there as opposed to the combined authority board?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good question. So yeah, the combined authority board consists of the mayor and the 7 leaders. The combined authority consists of all the members, including the members of this committee. I wanted to make that distinction, otherwise what we have is just the combined authority board, and the combined authority as a whole, which would include all members, will not be recognised in the protocol.
It's good to have you back. Keeps us on the straight and narrow on these things. They're important because it's back to what people understand of what local government is about. Okay, are we happy to recommend it to the board? Thank you very much, everybody. Right, now we get to item 11, also Edwina. And before I ask you, I just say that there's been and maybe I'm partly responsible for not having my eyes open on this. There's been a bit of a lacuna on how we handle work that's been done for the executive outside the audit programme, in the fact that it hasn't been also reported back to us. That's what Edwina is addressing.
Thank you. So if I just... so item 11, sorry, I'm just trying to find the page in the pack.
Whilst you're doing that, we are invited to consider whether we want to receive a summary of audit report, recommendations that are outside the plan that management have used, and to consider how often we would like to measure performance. Our earlier debate on how the combined authority is doing against recommendations. That's what we're asked to do. And
yeah, thank you.
You know, tell us to do it.
Yeah, so the background to this is, as has been discussed actually at this meeting earlier, you have normally received summary of audit reports, but the ask here is whether you want to consider receiving all audit reports, including those that have been commissioned outside of the annual plan. So that would include audit reports that have been commissioned by officers as part and parcel of their operational responsibilities, obviously subject to confidentiality. The second ask is also whether you want to receive more regularly updates on the implementation of recommendations contained in audit reports. As has been discussed earlier, this committee normally receives recommendations that are in arrears, and then that is tracked. So the ask is whether you as a committee want to consider then receiving updates more regularly, and whether rather than just tracking those in arrears, you also want to receive the recommendations as a summary of those recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, can I just clarify? We get a summary of the recommendations at the moment, do we not?
Yes.
So what you're proposing is that we do the same reporting for internal audit work that was done for management reasons as we get for what's in the plan. For that, that's the first bit of the proposal.
Yes.
And then there's, okay, so can we just, excluding confidential, are we happy that that should happen? Okay, I see lots of nods. Okay, so the first bit was easy. The second bit, how often do we want to see reports on the recommendations which are in arrears? We do it once a year at the moment. I heard a wish to do it more frequently.
I am appalled that we don't get these on a very regular basis. Everywhere else that I've been involved, audit recommendations are reviewed at least quarterly. On the other authorities, we only have audit committees quarterly, and at every audit committee there is a report on recommendations from internal audit reports. I don't suggest we do it at every meeting, but I would suggest that quarterly we should have an update on progress against recommendations.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I was just coming back. I was sure that we had sort of discussed this before, and I think what was being sort of put forward and discussed there was back to having sort of quarterly reports, and even if it's not everything, but sort of going back to sort of things by exception. So to some of the points being made today, how can we be assured that progress is being made, and if dates are slipping or if recommendations aren't being implemented when they should be implemented there. I think the annual report, I think is far too long to be able to then take a judgment and to recommend or put things in place to get things back on track. So I think I think last time we discussed it, I did say that quarterly would be almost like the minimum that you would go for.
Well, no, last time we discussed it, we agreed annually in the committee.
Yeah.
I think I take the appalled. I was chair of an audit committee where there were 500 recommendations going back 3.5 years, which is why I'm very dubious about the way the NHS works. And it took me a long time to get it up. Here it's been the other way, and I perhaps have been too relaxed about it because we haven't had any delays. I hear quarterly. Would people be happy with quarterly? Mm-hmm. Okay, so reporting recommendations in arrears that are in arrears, overdue, quarterly. Yep. Can we start September or next month? We have to have a meeting next month. How difficult is this?
I'm afraid I don't know. It will be based off the new system. So.
Well, unless there's a reason not to, let's have a first look at something next month. Okay. Thank you. Good. Now we go on to independent persons allowance and get back to Alison's point about how do we know what the words mean. I thought this was me. And I thought this was David, but it's neither. This is the independent legal person who provides advice to the authority and to others, which came to light, of course, in the conduct panel hearing. So I would ask as the first action is that officers could have a look at terminology so that we don't confuse the two types of people. I haven't got an answer, but we do need to find an easier way. Naming of parts, Mr. Kipling had it right. Okay, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, point taken about terminology. Perhaps we'll refer to yourself and David as independent members. And then
can I just be clear, that doesn't confuse councillors? What is an independent councillor? Still a councillor?
Yes.
So an independent member works, does it? Okay.
Okay.
No, it doesn't work. This is great fun.
Yeah, so I think the word is next independent person as opposed to independent.
That would be it.
Yes, so the Act itself says you have an independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee. So it would be, even though the word member would be a member of the Audit and Governance Committee, unless you want us to then refer to yourself and David in that complete statement, but otherwise we can leave it as independent members. The Localism Act itself defines independent persons, which is what this report is about, and they're called independent persons in the Localism Act. So, yeah, we can make that distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where humanity gets into a mess, doesn't it? Are we happy with that, despite the clarification from Moira? So we'll be you and I will be independent members, because I nearly had a heart attack. I didn't read the paper. What are we doing this for? Okay, right. So now you can go.
Thank you, Chair. There are two recommendations. The first one is to consider whether the two independent persons under the Localism Act should receive the same allowance. And the second recommendation is to recommend to the Combined Authority Board that the two independent persons should receive the same allowance. So when the two independent persons were approved by this committee, one received a high allowance because they were nominated as the lead, and the second was the reserve. However, this committee will remember that I brought a report, I believe in March, notifying the committee of how many code of conduct complaints have been received. That's meant that there's been more work for the independent persons, and they're roughly sort of, the person who's the reserve independent person is doing a lot more work than they've done before. And in any event, independent persons should be a bit more consulted on matters to do with, for example, the Constitution. They should attend audit and governance meetings, and that's where we're sort of looking to go. So the difference is about £400, the increase, but that then means that both of them are paid equally and fairly. Thank you, Chair.
Has this idea come from officers or as concerns from the independent people, persons?
So both.
Both. Okay, that's fine. Open the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question of clarification, because it refers to a reserve independent person, then a lead and deputy independent persons. Presumably, when the roles were created, the lead was there and the reserve was effectively a substitute if the lead was not available, and hence was paid a lower allowance. So there are two questions that come to my mind. Firstly, do we need to distinguish the title between the lead and deputy independent person? But more importantly, how do we determine which independent person is used for what? Because I wouldn't want us to be going down the path of duplication and having both independent persons turning up to the same meetings in order to justify their allowances. There is an additional point, is that I know what you said about the number of complaints under the Members' Code of Conduct. Surely that of itself is a reflection on our governance arrangements, that there should be so many complaints under the Code of Conduct, and perhaps that this should be something that, if we do agree this, that we should review the role of the independent persons, plural, in a year's time, once we've had some throughput on the improvement in governance. Because clearly, if our governance arrangements improve, then the workload for the independent persons should hopefully reduce. So I just want to flag that latter point, but also ask for the clarity as to how we define what work is done by which member. Sorry, which person.
Thank you.
Yeah, please, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. That's yeah. So I said earlier that what we're looking to do is actually look again at the roles. At the moment, the two independent persons mainly seem to deal with member code of conduct complaints. However, from my experience and knowledge of other local authorities, independent persons are used more widely than just looking at code of conduct complaints. So for example, when the changes to the code of conduct itself, the constitution, hearings processes, they would come usually every year to talk to the Audit and Governance Committee. So that's what we're looking to do. At the moment, what we do when we're looking for an independent person to deal with a code of conduct complaint would usually go to perhaps whoever is available, but sometimes one person is available, but for example, a code of conduct complaint there might be maybe 2-3 code of conduct complaints that center around the same incident. In that regard, then, it would be prudent for that one independent person to look at those code of conduct complaints together. So there's so many things that we sort of have to look at and balance. But if we do have a look and review their roles, there wouldn't be any reason, this is going on to your first question, there shouldn't be any reason to have a lead independent person and a reserve independent person, because the Localism Act itself doesn't actually suggest that. It just says that a local authority must appoint 1 or 2 independent persons. So there really isn't a reason to have you know, a lead person. So we can just allocate work as they come, and I think we need to use our independent persons more. That would be my view. I hope I've answered your questions.
Thank you for that. What that tells me is that this paper, although it's ostensibly about increasing the allowance for the deputy independent person to the same as the lead independent person, actually opens up a can of worms as to what is the actual role and responsibility of the independent persons, which fundamentally is a governance issue, because if the role of a specified post is not clear, then that is a governance issue. And therefore, what I'd say is I have no objection to the increase in the allowance, but I do feel that we need to have a proper review of the roles and responsibilities of the independent persons, and that needs to come back to this committee for approval.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is very interesting, this idea of the wider role, because the role is defined, but it's narrow, not in the way that the monitoring officer has mentioned. So do I take it that the equalising the grant and the question of inflation adjustment, because I think they were appointed 5 or 6 years ago, are we content that we ask the monitoring officer to equalise it and then to consider, in the way these things are considered, about uplift in due course? Are we happy with that? On the second question of a broader role, we have the new monitoring officer is in post on Monday. So should I suggest we ask for something in September that looks at the future role and the way in which independent persons contribute to the work of the authority? Would we be happy? Okay. Right, thank you.
Then the sort of off agenda but related to that briefly.
Depends what it is.
I want to ask about allowances generally.
I don't think I'd like to go anywhere near
right.
allowances generally. Thank you very much. I think that's definitely something. There are processes which I'm totally blind to, not for us. Although I probably understand what's in your mind. Well, we are due to do the performance management framework, which is a lead into this point about continuous improvement and embedding the changes. But I can't see Jules. It says here, Jules, you're going to be with us.
Sorry, I had to join online today.
All right, well, my note said you were going to be sitting over there. Right, welcome. I was interested on your full title. Amongst other things, you're the Insight Officer.
Yes, very interesting area of work.
We will have a chat about that sometime when we next meet.
Right.
So this is very germane to the debates we've been having earlier about how do we satisfy ourselves that the combined authority continue to satisfy ourselves that getting better and embedding the changes and not going backwards. And I think that sort of is my introduction to what you're going to illuminate. Do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. So we're bringing this report to committee today to enable members to review our progress on implementing the performance management framework that was approved by board in September last year. And this is in order to support the committee to carry out its role of reviewing the framework on an annual basis, to ensure that it's fit for purpose and working effectively. And this role for the Audit and Governance Committee is set out on page 16 of the framework, which is one of the 2 attachments you have. So evidence of our progress has been drawn from a lessons learned review, an internal audit, and oversight as part of the phase 3 of the improvement programme. Section 2 of the report in front of you details the commitments that we've made in the framework and our progress against these commitments and next steps. So in summary, the elements of the framework that we have implemented so far are corporate key performance indicators, quarterly corporate performance reports, which are reviewed by corporate management team, overview and scrutiny committee and combined authority board, directorate business plans performance reporting, project highlight reports, gateway review mid-term report for our gain share funding, the LEAP or LEAP, all staff performance reviews, performance management training for staff and members, and our State of the Region review, which links back to the Insight bit of my role there, is due to be published next month. Additional capacity is needed in order to implement the remaining elements of the framework, and we expect to have this in place by the end of August. Recruitment has been taking place, and all posts have now received offers. And then we'll be able to develop thematic performance reports for each thematic committee, Mayor will question times, social media content, and a project performance dashboard. The lessons learned review provided helpful feedback that enabled us to better understand stakeholders' needs and identify areas for continuous improvement. And the draft audit report has noted actions to improve the data validation processes for the corporate KPIs and also the evidencing approval processes. And those lessons learned and audit points are set out in section 3. I'm very happy to take questions.
That was a canter on a lot of information and a lot of complexity. Questions, comments? Stunned silence?
I noticed, thanks Chair, I noticed on section 2.9 it talks about social and digital media. For me, what I really wanted to understand is how we're really going to engage the community, general public, into communicating the performance management framework, or how things are improving in there really, and how we're going to sort of manage to get people to really engage and understand that.
Did you get that, Jules?
I did, would you like to answer it? Thank you. So thank you for that question. So absolutely, accountability to the public is one of the core principles that we are responding to through this framework. And we have plans to develop that in the second phase. So using a number of different methods, I guess, for different people who want to engage in different ways with our information. So the interactive project dashboard is going to be a really useful way for people to go and explore themselves what we're doing in their areas and where we're up to with delivering projects that impact them. And then the social media content will be a very helpful kind of press of the key findings coming out from those quarterly performance reports, both celebrating our successes and also areas that we need to develop. So that will be coming through the communications plan alongside the dashboard.
Jules, you're a master of your topic, but it's a very complicated one. How easy is it to get this into the understanding of the people who have to live within this framework?
Can you explain a little bit more your question, please?
It's very complicated. How do you make people understand it and use it?
Okay. So we're addressing that in a number of ways. First of all, we link everything back to the golden thread. So we are training staff up and disseminating the principles behind the performance management approach, the golden thread being one, so that all staff can see how their own objectives link through to Directorate Business Plan objectives and ultimately our strategic framework. And so training is definitely one way. Another way that we've been engaging people in the framework is to co-develop the processes and the indicators. So we had an external working group and an internal working group. So collaboration across the organisation, the directorates, and with our constituent authority partners has been behind ensuring that the 20 or so corporate KPIs that we're presenting each quarter, people feel that they're really important and are interested in finding out about our progress against those corporate KPIs. And I've been really pleased at actually how well that has worked. How that we've gone at the beginning of the year from a very understandably process conversation, what information people wanted to see and how we should present that information to make it engaging, to that has been very successful, and now we're seeing members enabled to interrogate the performance of the organisation and identify areas that they think we need to make more improvement on. And I guess that would be my third way that we have managed, we've taken a very listening approach that actually how you present the information is so important. So we've been working on a balanced scorecard, so you can see everything at a glance, a lag rating system, which is clear and understandable, exception reporting, and having different levels of information. Obviously, people have different amounts of time to be able to drill into this. So having the high-level summary within a report, but also the ability to look at the detailed charts and data and explanation of methodology if people wish to drill into that level of detail.
Thank you. Well, we're about the how things are done, which is you've set out what is happening or the intentions, not the decisions within it. What are we going to see next? When are we going to be able to see a suite of this report so that we can actually see how things are done, as opposed in the product, if you like, of all of this thinking that you've been leading on?
Indeed. So it would be possible to bring more information on the actual corporate performance report back to this committee at an early stage if you were interested. And then we're taking a staged approach to the further 4 thematic committees, one for each, a balanced scorecard of performance indicators for each thematic committee, and that will be developed throughout this financial year. So our aim is to achieve full implementation of the framework by March 25.
Okay. Well, could we look for something, say, in December, which produces, or lets us look at the reports that are live and updates us on your progress in completing your Odyssey by the end of March?
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, please do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I know just how much effort goes into things like this, and it's clear that you know what you're about and are taking the CPCA down a good path. So thank you very much, Jules.
Thank you.
Okay, how are we doing? Doing well. Okay, so item 14 is me. I had too much of me today. Normally, I would have presented the report for last year to the AGM, which was the 5th of June. I didn't do that for a number of reasons. One, because I was on holiday and the date of the AGM had been changed, which I carefully preserved in my diary. 2, I got advice from the monitoring officer on timing. And 3, I felt it was important to have had the internal audit opinion before it went to bed. So my intention is to take it to the July meeting of the CA board. I've had a go at reworking it a bit, giving them more time. And what I suppose I'm looking for, apart from agreement to it, is your sense of, is the balance about right? I think on the basis of today's discussion, what I would include in the forward would be another paragraph regarding internal audit and the subsidiary companies, because the forward I've tried to pick up the essence without repeating the detail. So with that introduction, comments, new or old, those who lived through last year, those who have yet to live through a year?
Comment on the report itself, but it's actually on the paper, which in purpose and proposal refers to 23-24, 22-23, and 21-22, and I was a little bit confused as to which year this report refers to. The draft at Appendix A, which in paragraph 1.2 says is 21-22, is clearly 23-24. And 1.1 refers to the number of meetings in the 22-23 municipal year rather than the 23-24 municipal year. Just wonder if those were typos or whether they actually intend to refer to different years.
I'm going to welcome you to join David as the excellent editorial eyes, because this is a Mr. Gates problem, I think. Thank you very much. Are we happy for me to take it to the board with just bringing into the forward the bit about internal audit? Thank you. So, David, and you'll do me a quick edit and let me know, will you?
No, there was just one other one.
Ah, good.
I can't remember where I saw it. Somewhere it said that the committee had met 8 times, and in fact, in the paper it says it met 6 times.
Okay. And? Okay. And I'll have another go trying to debug it. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. And this is a SIPFA best practice, but it is one of the best ways that I found of putting it on record, although in the first 3 years it was paint drying. This is a year with some substance. Okay, thank you. Right, now we come on to item 15, which is the work programme, which is a methodology we've built up over time, and we may get a bit of Mr. Gates in there too. But there's the routine Fourth Bridge stuff plus other things we've asked for. Does anybody have any comments or noted any glaring omissions? No? Sorry, yes.
Say that we have earlier discussed adding quarterly reports on recommendations. They need to be added.
That will, you know, decisions we've made today, absolutely so. And there is an other side of the coin on this, which I'm not suggesting we do today, but I'd like to leave in people's minds. Stuff can stay on there, whether it's still valid or not. We ought to always have that in our mind, because clogging up our meetings, we just need to bear in mind that things move on, and some things may need to be taken out of due course. And then, David.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Is the, or I can't see, just a quick look down, the annual governance statement, but it might have a different name that I'm not used to, but I can't see that. But
It comes, how does it come?
It comes as part of the draft accounts, so it'll be alongside those on your July meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes the items, except for the dates of the next events, which are the 10th of July. We have a development session on, sorry, 9th of July. We've got a development session online, which will be about internal control. The development session is a device. I don't like the word training, because that's a bit didactic. This is about getting the debate going and the wider things, and it's for substitutes as well as for members. And I have a family funeral that day, so I will not be attending, but that's unusual for me. But I very much encourage you. Officers put a lot of effort into this, and this is an informal way of getting some insights as to the way business is done within the authority. And then the next meeting is on the 18th of July in this very room with wonderful reception and coffee. Thank you very much.